To have you here with us today to discuss stop outs is something that I'm very passionate about and my colleagues are very passionate about, and so hope that you all are equally as passionate about it so that we can have a very lively discussion on today. We'll do a couple quick introductions. My name is Dakota Doman. I serve as the Director of College Completion here at the Coordinating Board. Prior to this, in a different life, like many of you, I worked in student affairs and also enrollment management, and so I always like to tell individuals that I kind of understand sometimes the struggles that you all are having in terms of the stop-outs and retention and persistence and summer melt and Title IX and all of those fun things that we just love to discuss on a daily basis. And so I will allow my colleagues to introduce themselves as well, and then we'll talk a little bit about other things that we will discuss today.
I'm Waylon McGuire. I'm a program specialist for college completion. A little bit of background on myself. I was a director of housing and residence life for several years, and also in admissions and enrollment.
I'm Josie Bruner. I'm with Research and Evaluation. I'm also the point of contact for High Plains.
And I'm Erin Willig. I am a program specialist in, apologize, that's early, not a copy yet. And I actually come from the world of social work and communication, so kind of a mixed background, and I'm just talking to you about outreach, different creative outreach programs that we're doing to the population.
Keisha?
And Kendra, you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, hi, I'm interning this summer with the Coordinating Board, and I am just finished my first year of my doc studies at UC for Educational Policy Leadership. I'm going to be working with the Are You Ready program, so yeah, excited to learn from everybody.
Fantastic. So for today, just to give you a little bit about the agenda and what you can expect. Of course, we'll talk a little bit about the objectives that we want you all to glean from the presentation. We'll talk a little bit about this stop-out landscape analysis. And that's really important for us all to understand when we're talking about stop-out specifically, who are we talking about and how many students and where those students may come from and the particular demographics of those particular students as well. And so it's important for all of us to be on the same page with that. Then, of course, we want to talk about best practices to support those individuals. And I will give you somewhat of a teaser trailer. There's not a silver bullet, right? So I hope no one came here thinking, hey, Dakota's going to tell me the one thing we're going to do at our institution, and we're going to bring it back, and this is going to solve all the world's problems. If so, I'll be probably a very rich man not standing here in front of you all today if we had that type of solution. But we're going to discuss a couple of things that tends to work with that particular population as well. We're going to talk a little bit about virtual advising, which we're very excited about, and we think that this can support your institution and your students as well. And then, of course, we all want you all to talk to us as well. It's important to actually learn what's going on at your respective home institutions and inside your particular region as well. And again, this is just a little bit about who we are and what we do here at the Coordinating Board. So objectives, really quick, just three quick objectives. One, we want to provide a general overview of the stop-out population. Again, what does that mean? When we say this student is a stop-out, how do we quantify and qualify that particular individual? We want to develop an understanding of the best practices to support those individuals when they come back. Some institutions, some of my colleagues, sometimes feel like those individuals are a lost cause, right? You say, hey, there's nothing we can really do. They have to kind of want it on their own. And that's not completely true. So we want to discuss some of the things that we can do and, of course, identify the potential specific activities and tactics that if we incorporate those things, we may be able to achieve some success with this population. Just really quick, by show of hands, who in the room works specifically with enrollment management? Okay, a few. All right, I just wanted to know that's going to come in handy later. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Josie, and she's going to get us through the information concerning who these individuals are.
Perfect, thank you. So basically, again, I'm Josie Bruner, Research and Evaluation, and I'm going to be talking not just about stop-outs, but really about near completers. So what do I mean by near completers? Those are the students who've actually taken a lot of credit, but they've never actually completed. One of the issues with our data is most of the times until just about fiscal year 2012, were we able to get data on actually earned credit. So that's where we know that they took a class and they got the credit that they needed. So previously, a lot of the data from the Coordinating Board on stop outs is actually based on attempted hours. So those were the hours that we have dating way back when. So when I'm talking about near completers today, just know that the data I'm presenting is only based on attempted hours, not earned hours. But we are hoping now that we have 6 years of the OOS that we're actually going to be able to start changing our methodology and actually base it on earned hours. But for today, when I talk about near completers, they're going to be 75% of those credits needed to earn a degree. So that's either an associate's degree if you're at a community college or technical college, or 90 credits if you're at a university. So, so basically, for our educated population target, we're hoping to reach 65% by 2030. So that's our overarching target for 60 by 30. And just according to the American Community Survey, we were at 43.5% for the state. So we're actually going up in this goal. We're very happy. But you can see here that this differs by region. So not all regions are expected to reach the same targets as the state. So they have been all set according to what the population, migration, growth for those regions are supposed to be. There are some adjustments because certain regions are supposed to go way over that 65% attainment level, especially like in the metro areas. And so those people have been kind of spread across the region. But you can see there sort of the variety we have. So why are we focusing on the stop-out population? Well, if we're trying to reach 60% of those with some sort of credential, you'll see that if we have those with some college and no certificate, it gets us much closer to that 60% goal. So if we were to get all of those students back and actually earning that credential, we'll be much closer already to that. So that's why we're trying to focus in on the stop-out population, which is why we have it under the 60 by 30 goal. So again, how we calculate stop-outs is based on attempted hours for now, but you can see how many students that we have across Texas who are near completers within the last 5 fiscal years that we have information. So their last enrollment would have been from 2013 to 2017. And we have over 200,000 potential students that we can bring back into higher education and hopefully earn that certificate or higher. So for the public 2 years, usually we look at whether or not they received an associate. For here, we're just seeing whether or not they had any sort of certificate. So that 167,000, those are those without any credential and left. And there were 75% at least attempted hours. And then for public 4 years, we have 51,000. It's a little hard to determine stop-outs because if you think about data, the only way we can identify a stop-out is that they're not in the data. So this is why, for methodology, it is a little tricky. So, we've been playing around with different ways. For research purposes, you always want to start with, like, an entering cohort and then track. But when we're talking about just trying to bring people back in, you really don't care whether or not they were FTIC for accountability. You're looking at anybody who's ever enrolled and trying to look for those hours. So here what we're doing is we're actually looking at anybody who is enrolled in that time period. And if they were enrolled, but within the last 3 semesters, and that would have been for here fiscal year 18 and fall of, we're in 2019, so fall of 2018, they were not enrolled. So that's how we were able to then identify those students. So again, it's a little difficult, a little tricky because it's finding the people who are not in the data. So we do have a breakout by gender and race, and African Americans are disproportionately represented among our near completers. They're about 13% of all enrollments, and yet you can see here when you're comparing with the other groups, there's already like 22,000 African American females and 16,000. So here they represent about 18% of our stop-out population. And then we have the 6-year completion rate, so you can kind of see where those groups stand. Our overall average for the state for completion is 60%. So that bar right there represents the state average of 60%. If you're above that, then your rate was above. If you're below, the rate was below that average. And one final note, so both people with the 60 by 30 goal, they're like, well, why are you focused in on 25 to 34-year-olds? With stop outs, aren't you getting a much older population? So here you'll see that most of our stop outs, our current stop outs, this is based on their age as of January 2019. So again, they might have stopped out, 5 years ago, but as of, January 2019, you'll see that the majority of those students are 25 to 34. So if they were to come back, complete that extra year, they would still be represented in that 60 by 30 goal. Less than 20% were over that age. The median age was actually 30. We also have the breakout by region for you. So obviously the more populous areas do have more of our stop outs. You can see that the majority of our stop outs are represented in Region 6, the Gulf Coast, but you do see some sizable numbers. Also, again, where you see more of the metro areas, that's going to be in that darker blue. We do see a lot more people there, but even so, you look across the state, we have many stop outs in many of our counties. So it's not just urban areas. It's the whole state of Texas benefit from trying to bring those stop outs back in. Yes.
How much of the Gulf Coast do you think it relates to the hurricane?
Well, I know that we keep information on that. We haven't looked into that as deeply, but it's something that we can definitely consider and start looking into a little bit more. But here's the nice news, is we are trying to get you all to be able to look at your stop-out information a little bit more. I just told you how we sort of identify those stop-outs. We're looking right now for a way that we can get that data back to institutions. And so what we're going to do, if you're interested, we're going to have you go into our craft system. This is a way where you can make inquiries, and I'll be able to show you the page, what it looks like. But basically, you can ask us that you're interested in getting stop-out data, so you can show the interest of institutions to receiving this data. And what you would get is, if you're a university, for all of the students that last reported you as their institution, we'll be able to show all of the students who had 90 or more attempted hours and did not have a degree from anywhere across the state. We also have data that will be coming soon from NST. And so we'll be able to take those students out as well. But we'll be able to provide those stop-outs to you if you're a CTC and 45 or more attempted hours. Again, we're going to be looking into maybe changing that methodology. So in the future, we might be able to use earned hours. Of course, you're going to get fewer students. But we would like to make this available to you. We're hoping to have that process finalized by fall 2019. So if you are able to, on our website, you can go to the very bottom, and there's a little place called Inquiries. This is where you can actually make all of those requests. And so if you click on Inquiries, you'll be able to submit a form that looks like this. And basically, only public institutions at this time will be able to request their stop-out information. So if you're from an independent, we'll not be able to show that information yet. Again, we're going to still look at some of those legal concerns. But go ahead and fill out the contact reasons as data analysis. And as your description, just put request information on a process to obtain institutional stop-out data files. So again, we're not promising that we'll provide them anytime soon, but once we get that process finalized, we'll email you with that information, and then you'll be able to make that request.
And this is for
near computers. Yeah. So it's not all stop out.
Right.
So if they transferred to university, you said the last institution they attended, they wouldn't, I would be able to get that information?
So it would have to be the last institution. So if they enrolled anywhere else and you were the first institution, then it would only be the very last.
So I was hoping I could get it for reverse transfer.
Well, and that would be something that we, actually with the reverse transfer, is something else that we might be able to consider. That one's a little bit easier because in Applied Texas, which we have consent. Versus here we're using that non-disclosure field. But reverse transfer might be something else that we would be able to do, and that might actually be a smaller hurdle because we have that actual descent into it. So that is something we could talk further. We have another session on reverse transfer. So that's definitely something that we'll look into. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Josie. So briefly, I'll lead into the reasoning on why we want to address stop-outs and why it's important to consider some of the barriers these students face and how we can be a collective unit as far as helping them to return to our institutions. So if you're already doing some of these things and have the knowledge, I apologize. But for those who are not, we hope that you can be a part of this discussion and start helping this specific population. So addressing the completion challenge, the need for degree reclamation, we can decrease the number of students with some college and no degree. Again, this is about 35 million Americans have been identified that have some college but no degree. So Josie just went through what that really means for the last 5 years in the state of Texas. So it's a wide range of students out there that have entered college but left empty-handed without a degree. We can support underrepresented student populations and reduce inequity in college completion. So again, students of color, first generation, low income, adult students tend to have higher attrition rates, lower student success rates. So this is what this is for us to try to put some type of initiative in place to assist with those students. We can also begin to start analyzing this data because there's millions in this selected group, so we can disaggregate this data, come together, look at enrollment patterns and outcomes to really put some type of equity-minded strategies in place to reengage these students to come back into the college to complete their degree. We want to provide a pathway to completion for students with mobile and non-continuous enrollment patterns. It's not traditional any longer with this group, especially that we're seeing they're more mobile, that not just your institution, they've attended another institution. And some studies have even been put out where 60% of their stop-outs have attended at least 3 institutions or more with this before they come back to finish their degree. We want to support students with because of their personal barriers to completion. Again, financial and personal reasons tend to be the highest reason why these students do stop out. It can be psychological, emotional problems, family issues, responsibilities, jobs. I like to call it life. Things happen. And as you identified, the age group, 25 to 34, tends to be that young adult age where these things tend to happen. And can expand re-enrollment and re-engagement policies and practices. We just want to be sure to identify what is in place and how we can make any changes necessary to get these students back. Principles of degree reclamation. Recognize that students deserve these degrees. These students that have spent tirelessly time and financial resources to get some type of credit or college courses, they're owed that. It's our job to try to help them to achieve and finish that degree and move forward. Communicate and elevate the value of college degrees. I'm sure they know the value to some degree. That's why they started in the first place. However, life happened, and now it's up to us to educate them. It's more important for them. Even with a certificate or an associate's degree, that creates economic, social, educational advancements and benefits, not only to themselves but to the society as well. Addressing inequities, I just touched base on that, just because of the large gap based on race, ethnicity, and low-income students. And then maintain progress on degree pathways, what else? Leverage technology and data systems. So we want to leverage degree audits, credit articulation, but also most institutions do not have their existing technology or systems in place to even identify these stop-outs or help and assist with maybe automatically auditing degrees, those sort of things. So these are the things we have to think about and always consider when we start addressing this specific population. And then some of the barriers students face. These are 6 barriers that have been identified most commonly amongst our group. So financial aid concerns, again, just knowing what is available for these students. They got FAFSA. Unlike the high school population, we have people in the high school constantly reminding them complete the FAFSA, and now it's even part of possibly even graduating, before they can even graduate with their high school diploma, they have to complete the FAFSA. So now, who is that person going to educate this stopout? So hopefully there's some single point of contact in place that can address that student and let them know what their options are. Complexity of the re-enrollment process, again, if they started 5 or 10 years ago, that process more than likely has changed. We're seeing changes every 2 years or so, so just imagine what they may feel coming back to try to enroll. We want something that's quick and efficient when they get ready to say, hey, I'm ready to take that step forward. Class scheduling and alternative delivery modes. We have to consider online, nights, weekends, hybrid classes, just to meet the demands of what their life responsibilities and family commitments may be outside of the class. Transcript issues. This is a big one. Sometimes they have a hold on their account, and sometimes it could be a minimum of $50 to $250. We got to look at those policies that are in place, and sometimes may have to provide some type of waiver or something just to remove that hold to allow them to continue their education. We know it may be old, it may be outdated. Sometimes students come in and they really want to know how much time and effort and cost it's going to take for me to finish this degree. And if you got policies in place saying we're not going to be able to evaluate your transcript until after you enroll, that's already a flag for that student, or they may be hesitant to re-enroll because they don't know what the expectations or that uncertainty is. And we also have to take the best interest of the student, because sometimes we may not really have what they want or how their credits that they have taken apply to the degree that they're seeking. So we may have to encourage them to attend a local or another institution to take some of those courses. So the best interest of the student. Anxiety and fear. They've been away for some time, and just the intimidation to step back on that campus, maybe being the oldest person in that room, or just having that confidence saying, hey, I can really do this. And then prior learning assessments. This one was interesting. These stop-out students, they want to know, how does the work that I've been doing, the life, the volunteer, the service hours, everything I've been doing since I've been out of school, how does that apply today, maybe towards college learning, some type of competencies? So we have to create these formal assessments. Say, is there anything they have done that can be applied towards some type of certificate or credit-bearing course to assist them completing their degree?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you determine these barriers?
So these barriers came through a study from the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, and they have a study with 6 states, South Dakota, North Dakota, Arkansas, Colorado, Nevada, and based on their study, this is the 6 common things that they came out with some of those barriers. Yeah.
Great question as well, and I'll add to that. I had a school that contacted me recently and said, hey, Dakota, we know that you're the director of college completion at the coordinating board for the state. Can you come to our institution and have a conversation with our staff about how can we increase the persistent rates, right, amongst the students that we have? And I kind of use that as a head fake opportunity. I feel bad for telling you all, because now you're not going to invite me to your campus, but I'll tell you anyway. So I said, sure, I'll come to your campus and we'll have a discussion about persistence and retention and graduation rates and all of those different things, because this institution was obviously interested in increasing their rates. But when I got in the room, the first question I was interested in were the students who left. All right, I was interested. It's almost like if you're dating. I'm going to go on tangent really quick. You know, it's good to know the person you're dating, but if you can find out why the last person stopped dating that person, you probably want to know that, right? Wouldn't you be interested in knowing that? At least I would. Maybe I'm telling on myself right here, but I would be interested in knowing that. And so when I went into that particular institution, before we got into the persistence conversation and the retention conversation and the graduation rate conversation, I wanted to have a stop-out conversation, and that institution wasn't as interested day. You're probably not that interested in talking about why things didn't work out with the other person. But that was really important for us because we know that if you don't change, what's going to happen? The same thing. The exact same thing is going to happen to that new cohort of students. And so when I met with this institution, I asked to meet with their students as well. And I asked, there was about 100 students in the room. I asked, hey, how many have thought about stopping out? Probably 95% of students raised their hand. And we kind of had this conversation about what are some of these reasons that you have thought about stopping out. And going back, a lot of them kind of dealt with these type issues. Now, they were the exception, meaning they overcame these things to kind of continue for one semester, but we know these things are going to be prevalent the next semester as well in terms of literally all of these things, especially the financial aid concerns. And so I did a little bit of qualitative research as well, and it still came to be. One of the things I'm interested in the schools as well is this idea of having a concierge model, right? We all traveled before probably, and one of the best things that I appreciate is a hotel or a particular airline that has an excellent concierge model, right? They take care of all of my needs. I call them, I say, hey, I'm in town, I want to go see a play, I want to stay in this hotel, I need a car. They do all of these things just because of their particular concierge model. My experience is the best one. This is not a promotion for this particular company because they do not pay me. Actually, I pay them. But American Express, they do a great job with this. They have a concierge model with my card. I can call them, and I did this very recently. I called them to get tickets to ACL because my wife wanted to go to some concert. I can't even keep up with it. But my concierge did. And so I was able to get tickets. Everything is fine. I'll be married probably for another year. Congratulations to me, right? But I'm interested in schools having that same approach and saying, if I call Tyler Junior College and I say, hey, I have 80 hours. I stopped out 3 years ago. I want to come back and finish this degree. What can I do? What does that look like, right? What does that decision tree kind of look like to say we're going to get this person to the right individual, they're going to service them, they're going to be enrolled in classes before they can even hang up the phone. But, what institutions have that in place? A lot of institutions do not, of course. And so I'm interested in saying what can we do to kind of get there? First thing I suggest that schools do is to kind of realize that you don't have that model, right? So if you're operating under the guise of, hey, we do that, we take care of these students, you really don't, you're not going to be in a position to improve the particular things that you offer because you think that you're doing a great job at them already. So the first thing you can do is do a secret shopper. I can tell you right now, and I don't know of all the schools in the room, but at least 20 schools in the state I've called, and I've came up with a story that said, hey, I am looking to re-enroll. And when I tell you the runaround that I got from most of the institutions was very disheartening. And because going back to Waylon's point, these students deserve these degrees. They really deserve them. And we're acting as if they kind of don't. We're acting as if it's like a secret club that we are trying to, exclude them from in a sense. And so when you do those calls and you say, hey, this is the situation I'm in, see the type of service that you get or the service that you do not get. And that's going to lend itself to really understanding why it's so difficult sometimes to get these students back inside of our environment. Another thing that I tell schools to do is to develop an internal communication strategy so that everyone knows, right? So everyone knows the person who's responsible. They say, hey, if you're interested in coming back to our school, call Dr. Gibbs. Dr. Gibbs is the person, I just gave you another job, Dr. Gibbs, congratulations. Dr. Gibbs is the person, he and his team are going to make sure that you enroll successfully. They're going to take care of your transcript issues, your financial aid concerns, anxiety and fear issues that you may have. They're going to make sure that they assess your credit for prior learning, all of those different things that we know that they may be interested in. We can make sure that they have one place to go about that. And, of course, you have to look at the policies and the processes for the institution to see are they really friendly or are they conducive to those students coming back. I know of a school that shall remain nameless, although I really want to tell you who they are so we can all shame them together because I don't think they're in the room. But I call and I say, hey, I have a balance. It's a $5 balance. I literally said $5. $5 balance. What can we do? And I know it sounds a little weird. It's like you really can't pay $5? But I told them, I am stressed. I can't pay $5. I cannot pay $5 at all. but I'm really interested in getting back, and perhaps after I do my FAFSA, if I get a refund, perhaps I can take care of the $5 down the line. I just can't do it today. But I'm excited to re-enroll today. I woke up, and today's the day I'm going to get back to school. I'm going to finish this thing. Without those 20 quarters, we really can't help you. Really? It was a false story. I have 3 degrees, but I still felt defeated then. I was a false person. And so we have to look at our policies to say, but what was happening was there was a person on the other line that was like, well, our process and our policy is this, and I don't want to get fired because then I'm going to be in your boat, not be able to afford $5 either, right? And so that makes sense. And so when we're talking about a concierge model, we're talking about really understanding, hey, these students. We want to serve these students. And anytime I go to a school, I talk to a president or a VP or a dean or a director or a coordinator even, everyone's like, we're here to serve students. We're here to serve students. And then I look at the processes and the policies and all of those things, and they kind of say something different. And so really ask yourself, when you go back to your home institutions, ask yourself and evaluate your policies and see what do they say. Another reason why we're really interested in this work, for me, degree reclamation really is an equity issue in a lot of ways. Like Josie just mentioned to you, she showed you the data to say the number of students that are represented as a minority amongst the total population, and then you see that number, how many we account for in terms of the stop out, and we have to really tell ourselves, hey, this isn't coincidental. Right? Something is going on, and if it's going on to that degree, it may be institutional. It may not just be happening by happenstance, but something institutional is going on that is not allowing the students to not only not complete, because of course they stopped out, but now we're not even being able to get them back. And so, of course, just really quick, and you all, I'm sure, know these things, the students of color are just more prone to stop out in the first place, right? And then, according to the research, they're more difficult to track in terms of, hey, when they stop out, can we get a hold of them? And I'll be one to admit that I'm guilty of this. On my driver's license right now, I have my mom's address in Houston. I don't live in Houston. Why do I have that? I have no idea. I have no really good reason for you. But that's just an example of sometimes how difficult it can be to track students. And we have to realize that that's an issue. One of the quotes that we know is, life happens. As Waylon said, right? These students stop out, life happens. But one of the quotes that I've learned to come to appreciate, unfortunately, but it's true, life happens more to poor people. It just does, right? To people who can't afford to pay the $5, life really happens to that person, right? And so we have to be mindful of that fact and say, okay, now this is not only just an issue of getting people back in college, but this is an equity issue as well. And if we are going to be equity champions, as many of us claim to be at our institutions, then you have to pick up this torch and say, we're going to do something about this because this is a major issue. And if I want to make a difference in my community, then this is something that I can do to impact, and I think that's really important. Designating an accountability lead goes back to me giving that job to Dr. Gibbs because we know what happens is everybody's doing the job and sometimes nobody's doing the job. And we can say it's everybody's responsibility, like retention and student success, but by going to your institutions, usually you have a dean for, student success, or you have a dean for retention, or you have someone who's kind of the lead in doing that particular job. And so ask yourselves, who's responsible? And it's not enough to say, well, this person's over enrollment, so they must be responsible, because they may not necessarily be the case. Form an institutional team. And the team approach helps for several reasons. We all know the benefits of having a team dynamic, but these offices and others that are not listed here, the registrar's office, IR, IT, communications, student affairs, academic affairs, imagine if the chief individual over each of these areas, or even a particular deputy chief came together and said, you know what, we're going to make this a priority. We're going to make sure that we're doing this work of getting near degree completers specifically. They're really, really close. They're really, really close. We're going to make this a priority, and these are the people who are really going to almost be like the Avengers, right? I love superheroes. So if you have an Avengers team on your campus and say, we're going to be committed to doing this work, do you think that it'll help out? I think it would. And so that's really important as well. This third piece is important, and the coordinating board is in a position to help you with this, is sharing the data necessary. So a lot of times, anytime I go and I'm talking to VPs, I'm talking to presidents, I'm at the institutions, they always want to know, Dakota, how can we get information? Now, besides the fact that I'm giving you information that you may have or you may should have because it's from your home institution, a lot of times I'm saying, well, if that's all you need, then let us help you with that. Let me make sure I can be in a position to get you the information information that you need because sometimes they don't know, all right? And it really starts with knowing what are the numbers we're talking about. And when you start seeing those numbers adding up, everyone starts getting involved because even if you are the CFO or whatever your position is at the institution, when you see those particular customers or students who are that close, then you start having different conversations. If I'm over the alumni office even, if you tell me, hey, we have, 1,000 people who are this close to becoming alumni, and if they can increase your alumni donor base by even a percentage, you mean to tell me that particular vice president for advancement wouldn't be interested in that? Yes, sir. I think they're a bad vice president for advancement. All right. And the last one, award mini grants to near completers. Raise your hand if your institution offers some type of mini grant in terms of emergency aid even, or any of those type things. Okay, so I'm seeing a few hands up, and that's important because, again, life happens, but life happens even more to poor people, and we don't want that to be the reason why someone can't complete after they spent all of this money getting so very close, right? And so perhaps, again, going back to institutional process or policy conversation, perhaps there is some, and it's an investment like anything else. When we go out, institutions, and we go out and ask individuals to give us any type of funds to our institution, we're not asking just because of benevolence, right? We're not asking because of charity. We're saying this is an investment. You give us this, and we're going to take that, and we're going to do something with it. It's the same thing with these schools. It's the same thing with these students, and sometimes we forget that to say, well, if I give a student a $200 grant to get back to re-enroll, is that going to pay dividends? And I'm probably an optimist, but I believe, yes, it's gonna pay dividends. It's definitely going to pay dividends. So these are a couple of things institutional-wise that I would strongly encourage you all to take a look at and to see what can you implement, because if doing so, it'll definitely help. One of the things that helps out a lot as well is the community partnerships in terms of saying, well, what can we do as a community? Because, again, these are issues that are prevalent in our community. If we have jobs that require degrees and these individuals are not getting these degrees, then what is they going to do to the industry within that particular community? It's going to suffer, right? It's going to suffer. And so these are a couple of things in terms of having institutional practitioners go out to the communities, whether it's a bank or whether it's a hospital or even like a calling center, whatever the case may be, and have conversations with those individuals. And perhaps if you're not interested or if you're not capable of giving them the supplements required to get back into school, maybe their employer is, So if you were to take an employer in your particular hometown and say, hey, through the research that we did in conjunction with the coordinating board, we realized that you all have 20% of your employees are near completers. We want to help you with that, right? And what type of partnership can you form so that you are doing your part and that particular employer is doing their part to try to get this student, near completer, back in school and give them a degree? I think that's doing some great work, and I'm sure a lot of employees may be interested inside that particular partnership. Just really quick to give you all some examples of some things. I won't go through all of these, but these are a couple things that we've done either as a state or other states have done to do this work of degree reclamation. One of the few things I will point out is, of course, I actually will start at the bottom. Raise your hand if you've heard of grad techs. Yeah, I hesitate when I ask because I didn't think I would see a lot of hands up. I appreciate you, Aaron. Thanks for raising your hand. So grad techs, and I don't have to discuss necessarily the historics from it, but going forward, grad techs is actually going to be a initiative that we're taking as an agency. There's going to be a consortium of institutions who are going to work together to do the work that I kind of just explained. And what they're going to do is whether a student stopped out at their school or any school in the state of Texas or any school in the world really, but they live in the state, then they're going to be able to go and do the things that I've just described in terms of having a concierge model and doing things to try to get those individuals back. Now, we're going to start somewhat small, and so we've already kind of been able to say who is going to be a part of that particular consortium. So if your school is not a part of it, that doesn't mean that you can't do this work. That doesn't mean that you can't help. It doesn't mean that we're not going to grow. But at this time, we kind of already have the schools in place. But it's going to be important for us to kind of be able to say, hey, we're doing the work. We're trying to really go ahead and identify some other best practices that schools are experiencing as to why these students are not either, of course, getting their degree or what's hindering them from coming back after a semester or a year or whatever the case may be. I do want to highlight the A&M, with the A&M system. They're doing this work as a system approach, which I would suggest every system do. And if you're not a part of a particular system, then perhaps you could still work with a consortium of schools to do this work in terms of saying, let's look at the data, let's identify the barriers, and let's do something about it as well. I'm going to bring up Aaron to talk about virtual advising. I think this is going to be something that's going to help us out tremendously in terms of the stop-outs. Thank you.
Yep. So I just want to share a little bit about this project. This is a new idea that we had as a way of reaching this population. Dakota mentioned some of the things that are a challenge about reaching this population, and also our focus on equity in this. So one of the reasons we've chosen to go virtual, and particularly through mobile, and I'm going to explain how this works in a second, is because it's a really important piece of digital equity. While not everybody always has access to high-speed internet or other ways of reaching the internet, almost everyone has a phone that can receive text messages. And you don't even have to have a smartphone, right? You can receive text messages on one of those old flip phones with a T9 keyboard, right? So it's one of the reasons we've approached it this way. So we've created, in partnership with the University of Texas at Austin through our Advise Texas program. I imagine most of you are familiar with Advise Texas. So we thought that was a natural home for this because we see this as a virtual way of providing some high-level advising for students, not just for stop-outs, but we are starting with reaching out to stop-outs. We just launched in May, and I'll tell you a little bit about our campaign. So our targeted launch started with a small group of stop-outs in the Rio Grande Valley. We started our campaign by reaching out to them and asking them a few questions. The first question we asked is, are you interested in going back? They say yes. We ask them, what were the barriers? And as you are probably not surprised to hear, the main barrier is financial aid. So from there, we learn, and if it's not financial aid, we also ask about transfer and some other pieces. And from there, we can target communications at them through text message to walk them through getting a transcript and having an advising conversation at a particular college, or looking at the FAFSA as an adult student. What does that mean? How is that different from when you did it when you were 19? Having some of those conversations. We are also using the chatbot and some select high schools, and we actually shared this information with some more high schools yesterday, and we're probably expanding through some education service centers. But we're starting in some limited number of high schools because we want to understand what the language we need to use with high school students, how it's different than the language we're using with stop-outs, and how the students might engage in a little bit of a different way. So that's a little bit more of a limited launch. I'm going to show you an example of some of the conversations with ANDi. So if you've ever communicated with Siri or with Alexa, you've had these kinds of conversations. Also, if you've ever bought anything online and if you're shopping on Nordstrom's and the little personal shopper comes up, or you're on I know our insurance at the coordinating board, we have a little virtual advisor that can pop up and guide you through questions. Now, do they always get it right? No. But do they usually get it within some range of helpful information? Usually. And so that's what we want to demonstrate. So this is an actual conversation from the AI. So the student asks, can I drop a class? And this is the answer that they received. This from our knowledge base that we've developed. And for those of you in the back, it says you can visit the online registration system or visit the registrar's office at your college to drop courses. Remember, this could impact your financial aid status. So a really general answer, right? We're not getting into the specifics of a particular college, but we're giving a broad base of information to help answer this student's question. And hopefully, our hope is to prompt them reaching out to the college and getting more specific information. So particularly with stop-outs, we think of this as a way of starting the conversation, a really low bar to entry with no judgment. When you have to call an office, when you have to speak to a person, especially if we have some of the barriers like Dakota and Waylon brought up, can be intimidating. And there are actually studies to show that students will ask a robot or a chatbot questions that they won't ask a person because they don't have the same fear of being judged or looking stupid or looking like they don't understand the system. So I also want to show you this side. On this side, you'll see a student asked a particular question about a specific institution. Can you help me get into UT? And there's a longer chain here, so this doesn't show the whole conversation. But basically, if we get a question like that we recognize is beyond what the AI can really respond to, we have a team of advisors who've been trained in the same way we trained our Advise Texas advisors
to be able to jump into the conversation and provide more personalized information that's more specific to a particular institution. And UT is the example here, and UT is our partner on this project, but the advisors are equipped to talk about any college in Texas at a really basic level. And we also reached out to all of your colleges earlier this year to ask for contacts. So we have a list of an advising contact, an admissions contact, and a financial aid contact that's been provided from most of the colleges in the state. So our advisors can then refer to those if they get beyond kind of the basic level of information. We want to get those students right to you. We don't have any interest in holding on to them. We know that we want them to go to you. I know we're getting close on time, but I want to just say a few things about virtual advising, what it is and what it isn't. What it is a triage tool and an opportunity for us to catch students at the moment that they have that interest. So maybe, Dakota mentioned this earlier, maybe that moment is you wake up one morning and it's 6 a.m. and you're motivated in that moment. Or maybe it's 11 p.m. when you see a movie or an ad or something inspires you, or you have a conversation with your child that inspires you to take up the action. The beauty of ANDi is that they can pick up the phone at that moment if they've already had a connection with them, or they can jump online to our website and they can have that conversation then. And even if they don't get all of the exact answers that they need, they've done something, and what we know about behavior change is once they've started taking some of the steps, you're more likely to continue doing so. Versus if you think of this at 11 p.m. and you know the advising office is closed, and then the next day you have to work and you don't have another opportunity to call until the end of the week, and those kinds of things can really catch up with students who, as they talked about, life is already getting in the way. We want to get out of the way and make it easier. We are in no way interested in replacing in-person advising. We are very aware that this does not do that, does not get to the same level of detail that an individual, the same level of skill that an individual can have in an advising conversation, but again, just catches them at that moment. And we see it as one tool among many, and we also see it as a tool that's infinitely scalable. So some of the studies that have been done, Georgia State did a study using this kind of technology to help prevent summer melt, and they saw about a 3% change in their enrollment rates in the fall. And that's actually pretty similar to what some of their in-person and other kinds of interventions saw. It's a similar return, but it's a much smaller investment, and it's much less intensive on your staff who already have a lot on their plate. So we think it's a really possibly scalable solution and something that we can offer to support your institutions as you're doing this work.
Question.
Yes?
What common issues or concerns do you have with the opt-in, opt-out?
We're working with a vendor, and they have a lot of experience doing this with other institutions, and so the students should be very easily able to opt out. They can send a text message that says stop, and they're able to opt out right away. So do you have a particular concern?
Well, I've used something very similar, but we had to build the opt-in and then be able to control and maintain when a student opts out.
So the vendor we're working with has some systems in place to help us do that, so we're not starting from scratch. They have a lot of experience doing that, and they also have a lot of experience working with higher ed, so they are very familiar with FERPA and some of the requirements there, so they've been able to help us navigate that. And the first group of students that we reached out to, we did so through some applied checklist data and using the permissions that we have there to communicate with those students. We reached out to about 5,000 students, and we had about a 14% opt-out rate, which is not bad considering that this was a list that went all the way back to students who had stopped out as far back as 2012, and that we know that these students are already disengaged. So although that's a little higher than you would like to see with kind of a general outreach, it's actually not too bad of a rate considering the population and the challenges that we know that they're already facing. I know we're at time. We want to allow time for questions. I see you pacing. I don't want to take your questions out. So I just want to say really quickly, we are working on scaling this up. So we started with a really targeted intervention in one particular population and a small pilot with high schools. But we are working on being able to reach the full state. We are figuring out partners for the next phase. So if you are interested, I would love to talk to you if you think this is something that you'd be interested in exploring having at your school. And we all also are working on getting more specific with the information that ANDi can provide in terms of institution-specific information. Right now, if you ask a really institution-specific question, ANDi will be stumped pretty easily, I'll be honest with you. But that's a technology issue in terms of how the AI works and something that the vendor is working with us on, and so something that we are hoping is going to get better and better, and so we'll be able to answer more and more specific questions as we go.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Who's your vendor?
Admin Hub. Yep, they're also working with West Texas A&M and a couple of other institutions in the state, and they are the folks who worked with Georgia State on some of the work that's been pretty highly publicized. And I see nodding heads. I know some of you have heard of that work. So.
What is the